It's a very comfy chair.
Thanks.
Very good.
Yeah.
You want to be interviewed too? Alright, so I'm Matt Mercer. I'm here with the Dayton Music History Project, talking to Janet Awe about her life in the music industry. So we're just going to go through and ask some questions and just tell some stories.
Okay.
If you have any questions for me along the way, just go ahead and hopefully it'll just be a very organic conversation.
All right. Yeah.
Alright, so first off, I just want to go over some personal background of yourself. Were you born in Dayton?
I was born in Dayton. Yeah, I was born in Dayton, Miami Valley Hospital, born on the east end of Dayton on East 4th Street. My grandparents, my dad's from here. My mom's from West Virginia, so my dad's mom and dad were here, and we were all real close. I grew up here. When I was 7, well, we ended up moving to Huber Heights when I was 7. My grandma and grandpa moved here first. They were like some of the first residents of Huber Heights. And then we lived with them for a while, about a year or so. And then we got a house up on Chambersburg Road, which is where I, went to school. I graduated from Wayne. And, as far as music goes, I wanted to play the guitar as a child. I had, vision in my mind of myself doing that. And I didn't have a musical family, but I had a picture in my mind of wanting to play the guitar for some reason. And so I started taking guitar lessons when I was 7. I took from a few different teachers around town then, Ballou Music, Americana Music. And when we moved to Huber Heights, I think that's really where my correlation to the Dayton music scene got started, because I had a guitar teacher in Huber Heights named Gene Shiverdecker, and he was already a part of the Dayton music scene. So like this would have been like 1958, because I was 7 years old at that time. So from then on, I took guitar lessons from him every week, and he turned me on to jazz. He played some tapes for me one day of Julie London and Barney Kessel doing Cry Me a River. And it was just a poignant, one of those moments like where it's like something just hit me. It was like, wow, I love this. And from then on, I fell in love with jazz at the time, the music that was being played. And actually, a lot of it was really created during those years. Miles Davis and all the great jazz players, Bill Evans. My favorite drummer was Tony Williams. And I would spend my evenings in my bedroom listening to their albums on my stereo. And I loved singers. I loved Barbra Streisand. Later on, I got into Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald. And my guitar teacher had a band made out of guitar students. It was a big band. And we all had our part to play in the band. We'd rehearse, I think we got together once a month or something like this in his garage. And all the guitars played all the saxophone and horn parts, because he had all the charts. Well, I was playing a third horn part, and I really was never a person that could really hold a harmony or find a harmony in a song. I could always find the melody, but I was playing the music, but I really couldn't hear what I was playing. I was just reading the notes. So I was doing it right, but I really wasn't aware of what I was doing. To tell you the truth, I couldn't hear the harmony that I was playing. So one day, he cleared a great big space in the garage while we were setting up, and I thought, I wonder what that's all about. And he said, we're going to have something new today. And so that day, a fella came in with a set of drums. And I had never seen drums before. We didn't have MTV then, we didn't have all this media hitting us in the face daily about so many things. And I don't know, it was like when we started playing, when I heard these drums, it's like I could hear them. And it just sparked this desire in me to want to start playing the drums. So I was excited. I told my mom, I want to play the drums. You know how when you're a kid you want to do something, you just have to work on them, right? I think I spent about a year, asking for drum lessons. And they finally, relented. And there was a drum teacher in Huber Heights at that time, Jimmy Green. He was the house drummer at Seth Miller's Supper Club. So Jimmy knew Gene, so that's how we found out about him. And I started taking I was still taking guitar lessons, and I started taking drum lessons from Jimmy once a week. He was up on Brant Pike at the time. He had his garage, he had turned it into a studio, and that's where he taught. And, I teach now, and, one of the things that not with all kids, but for me, I went to my lesson, I listened to what the teacher said, I'd go home, I'd practice, I'd come back, and I never really questioned what I was being taught. I sort of just listened to what they said and then practiced and then went back, and that's how I learned. So I took lessons for years. From 7 on, I had guitar lessons every week. At 12, I started with the drums every week, and there was a lot of music going on in Dayton, at that time. A lot of great musicians, a lot of great music, a lot of great nightclubs. The nightlife was very classy, I guess you'd call it. The clubs were beautiful, gorgeous. A lot of them were supper clubs. You'd go into a beautiful room, people got dressed up, everything was beautiful, and everyone was enjoying, the evening with music, maybe dinner, dancing. Just the whole atmosphere and way that music was approached and celebrated back then was completely different than it is today, And growing up like that, and being a part of that, it was just something it was a beautiful experience, and I have great memories of it. There was a band that played in town during that time. It was an all-female cabaret band. They played 40s type music, all the standards of jazz, the Latins, all the different rhythms that went with the ballads, the brushes, the Latin rhythms, the swing, the jazz, the straight ahead, all the music in that genre. They were playing it, and they were all women. They were a family basically. The mother played the piano. That was Nina Kindig, and her daughter Bobby, or Roberta Kindig. She was a trumpet player. She played trumpet, baritone, banjo, bass, trombone, and she sang. She was multi-talented and great at all of them. They all played by ear. Nina, her mother, was a classical, studied classical music, in college. She was a classical pianist, and it was a common occurrence for classical musicians to end up in jazz, as they went out to find a career, because, everybody couldn't be a classical piano player anywhere in the world. So that's how she got into the kind of music she was into. So she really knew what she was doing. She knew how to play it all. And then her other daughter, Terry, was the drummer, and she sang. And so what happened was Terry was playing bass, and they had this other girl playing drums with them, not part of the family, but Ann Eklund. She was their drummer at the time, and her mother got sick. She was from Seattle. Her mother got real ill, and so Ann had to leave to go to Seattle to be with her mom. And they had to keep up this image of having an all-female band. And I was only 14 at the time, but I was the only girl in town that was playing the drums at all. And my teacher, Jimmy, who was like the house drummer at Seth Miller's, they all knew one another. All the musicians knew one another. The Green Derby, where the Debutantes was the name of this group, where they were playing, was just a block and a half down the street from Seth Miller's. It was just a corner bar called the Green Derby, right at the highway. And in fact, if you go there now, it's just like a plot of land. Mm-hmm. The building isn't even there anymore. But they wanted to know Jimmy wanted to know if I could do it. He asked my parents if it would be all right if I would sit in for Ann while she was away. Of course, I wanted to do it. I was still in high school, so I remember they had to get permission from the union, and they had to get permission from the liquor board because I was underage. I'd be going to a bar every night, 9 to 2. They played 5 nights a week, and that's what most most of the clubs did. It was like 5 nights a week, 9 to 2. People were earning a living back then. People were supporting their families, you know, just like they had a job, like any other job back then, and they were capable of doing that. And that was another wonderful thing about that period of time, was that, you know, the best musicians could do that, you know, and you had quality music, and you had people earning a living, and you had a union, you know, you had a strong, powerful musicians union that enforced their rules and their laws, which we don't even have that today. And that all went away through time. And I mean, like, my dad would take me down there every night, and then he'd come and pick me up. I started playing down there the drums, and that's where I learned to play all the standards and all the rhythms and all the beats and the fills and everything that went along with that kind of music. They taught it all. Well, I had been learning it in my lessons, but down there I really got the practical you know, experience of actually doing it along with the music as a drummer, and it was just, I just loved it. You know, it was great. And so I was still going to high school, then I was going down there and playing, and that went on for quite a while. I think, I'm not sure exactly how long I filled in for her, maybe if it was for a summer or for a year, but for however long it was, when she came back, then I always, like, sometimes I would substitute, but then other things started happening. You know, I would start getting calls from other groups that needed, like, you know, a drummer for a wedding reception, or a drummer for some kind of a party or gig somewhere. You know, I played continuously after that as a drummer in this area, for, like, out at the base. I'd play at the different clubs there. I'd play lots of wedding receptions. That was a big, you know, gig for people to play, and parties, private parties, blah blah blah, etc. On and on. And you know, you'd always get, like, some of the jobs you'd get dressed up for. I had clothing that, you know, I would get really super dressed up for when I played. And then I also, some of the jobs were like, you know, you'd wear like a red blazer and black slacks and a white shirt, like everybody wore the same thing, you know, so it was one or the other. And so that was always, you always knew what you were going to wear. And everything happened on time, you know. You play 45, you'd break 15, you know, you didn't say you were going to be there at 9 and then start at 10 or 11. And, you know, it worked out. Then, you know, you made your money doing it. So I did that, you know, for years. And then I remember my mom took me one year, she took me one night to a club in Fairborn to hear the Roy Merriweather Trio. He was playing there. He's from here. He doesn't live here anymore, but he's a piano player that grew up here and was really, you know, like a kind of like famous. He was just such a great, you know, piano player. Everybody knew him, loved him. He played all the time. He had a trio, piano, bass, and drums. And I just remember when my mom took me out there, I was like, just flipped out. I just loved him. It was like, he was so great and everything. And then eventually, like, I filled in for him a couple times when his drummer was sick, and you know, he told me, he said, I like your feeling. He said, if I ever need a drummer, I'll get in touch with you. And I said, okay. And that's kind of how music went. You know, it's still like that. It's like you're on your own. You know, everything, you're depending on your own self and your own ability to meet and to find and to make things happen with people in order to play music. So anyway, I did that, and then, like, what happened was, I went to Wright State. I went to Wright State after I graduated from high school, and I studied music education there. I really wanted to go to Berklee in Boston. That's where I wanted to go. My dad wouldn't let me go. So I went to Wright State for a couple of years, and then my dad finally let me go to Berklee, and then I was going to there studying my drums, and then at that time Roy Merriweather came back to my school at Berklee in Boston and asked me if I wanted to join his group. Well, I feel it was a mistake. I shouldn't have joined his group, because I should have graduated. I should have got my degree. I left the school to play with him because I wanted to play. And after about 9 months, the whole band thing fell apart. And so I was really devastated, you know. And after that, that's when I left here and went out to California. So as far as the Dayton music scene goes, that was kind of like the end of my period in the Dayton music scene. You know, it was a great beginning, and I had so many wonderful people who influenced me and loved me and helped me, and just the whole scene back here back then was to me it was a big love fest. Everybody supported one another, and it was a wonderful time, you know. We played at the Forum Club with Roy. I played with him there for, God, at least a year or so. Well, the whole time we played there. We traveled a little bit, but we played at the Forum Club. And then we had different singers. We had his sister sing with us for a while, Betty. And then we had Bobby, you know, Brookshire Gordon. She was from here. She had been on the road with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. When she came back home, she sang with our group, with our trio at the Forum Club, and it was a really great musical, you know, group at that time. You know, the trio and then her singing. It was really good. And then, you know, after that, you know, I felt like, well, there's nothing more I can go on to here in Dayton, and I wanted to keep pursuing. I wanted to be a jazz drummer. That was my whole goal in life. And so that's why I left here and went out to California. So, and I think I went out there in like 1971 or 2 or maybe 2. So from like, you know, time I was like 58 to 71, I was a part of the scene. There was a lot of other musical acts here in Dayton at the time. I didn't hear a lot of them because everybody was always playing at the same time. But, you know, there was like Anna Reno's, there was, like with the Sutmillers, there was constantly groups coming in and out, traveling throughout, you know, tours. I got to go with Jimmy to the rehearsals and sit in at his rehearsals and see how the charts were read for the shows and how they were played, and see all the great performers doing their rehearsals, you know. And, you know, the club scene was really, I can't say enough about it back then. It's like, too bad, you know, too bad it all had to go away.
So, going back to kind of your childhood and upbringing, was there any kind of music typically playing at home, or was your family really into any specific genre of music?
Not really. I would say no. I mean, we didn't even, I don't even remember, I guess we listened to the radio in the car, but I don't really remember. Well, my sister, now she loved music, and she was all into, she's like 4 or 5 years older than me. She was all into like the popular music at the time, right? She had a stack of 45s, and she'd play them in the bedroom at night. And so that type of music, it wasn't jazz, but it was the popular music of the time. I heard all of that because of her. You know, she knew every word, and she could sing every song, and whenever we'd take a trip, you know, we'd sing songs together in the car. But yeah, she loved music. And there was places around here back then, like dance clubs. People danced. You know, there was the Avondale Club, which was not that far from here. I think it was somewhere down near Valley Street. My sister they used to go there every weekend, and like, they just had a ball listening to music and dancing. You know, it's like a shame that people don't still do things like that anymore. But there was always somebody there was like the Fairborn skating rink had a dance club that she would go to, and every now and then I'd talk my parents into making her take me with them, you know. Yeah. But yeah, no, my parents never really huge music fans. Like, they didn't present music at home. We watched it on television when it would come on. Not really I remember seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. There was a couple of shows like Soul Train that would come on once a week with popular, like, funky music. And but my mom loved country music. She was from West Virginia. She loved country. Now, I can't say she wasn't musical or creative. She was. She loved country music, so I don't remember hearing a lot of it around the house. I know she had tapes that she played in the car, But like all the great country music, she loved Waylon Jennings and, I don't even know the names of all of them. Loretta Lynn. Of course, I love Loretta Lynn too. And there's probably a lot more of that older music I could appreciate if I listened to it more. I used to listen to it when I had her tapes, when I'd listen to them in the car, and they were very good. But my dad wasn't really musically inclined. He'd always try to mimic, that's Amore. What was that fella that, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Amore. Dean Martin.
Dean Martin.
Yeah.
It's always the biggest debate when I talk to people that are really into music is who do they prefer between Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. That's a really big divide amongst musicians. Yeah.
What are they? Is there a percentage factor?
I know of New Mexico. A lot of the ranchers out there, the long-term family ranchers, they can't stand Sinatra.
Really?
They are full-fledged on board with Dean Martin.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the house museum that I work at, they have everything from 45s to one of the first generation iPods, but not a single Frank Sinatra track in that house.
That's interesting because it took me a long time to appreciate Frank Sinatra too. I never was into him, growing up or anything at all. But I remember one point in my life, later on, I did really become interested in him because he was so pitch perfect. And he took a song and he respected the song. He sang it just the way it was written, perfect pitch. He presented the song really well, and that's what I learned to appreciate about him. Yeah. My friend Terry, that was the drummer and the bass player in the Debutantes, we were kind of close in age. She was a little bit older than me, but we became really good friends. And I'd go over to her house, and she loved Frank Sinatra. She would play Frank Sinatra. She turned me on to a lot of music, and we would sit for, an entire day, hours upon hours, and I'd take my guitar and we'd work on figuring out the chords to these songs, that she'd put on and play. And that was a big influence on me musically, her. In fact, our friendship was it was so wonderful to have a friend like that you could share the thing you loved the most with, Yeah, she was fantastic.
Do you remember the first album you ever bought? Or one of the first albums?
The albums that I remember would be Miles Davis, with Tony Williams, and then Barbra Streisand, My Name is Barbara, with Free Again on it. Those were probably the first couple of albums that I bought. And then my collection, as a kid consisted of more of the same. And I had a pretty great album collection. It wasn't huge, but it was valuable to me and had a lot of good quality to it. And it was funny. It wasn't funny, but it was unfortunate. One of the trips after I'd moved to California, I packed up my stereo and my album collection to take with me on the plane to have out there, and it got lost. So all those albums, and I don't know how it could have gotten lost, but I never got them back, nor my stereo. I had a Marantz amplifier, this great Marantz amplifier, had my turntable, everything, and it all got left somewhere. I think somebody may have taken it. I don't know what else to say about it. What else could have happened? But it took me and in fact, it's so funny because that Barbra Streisand album that I wanted to hear so badly, that Free Again, the way she did it on that one album, and I think she only did it on one album. I never could find it again. I think in some of the Miles Davis albums I never found again. I would always look for them. And then they had up here in Huber Heights, they have a radio station up here, and then once a year they'll do this massive album sale. And it was about maybe 3 years or something like that ago. I went through it and I found the Barbra Streisand album, so I finally did get it back.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you an avid concert goer? Did you go to a lot of performances?
Yeah, a lot of jazz, nightclubs. It was a small, intimate, setting, and I went to many of them. I played in them. Around here, Jillies, you know, the first Jillies was the Green Derby where I played. After it was the Green Derby, it became the first Jillies. So it was just a little bar. And I used to go there all the time. I heard George Benson there. I talked to George Benson, you know. I told him I wanted to play with him. I heard Bill Evans there. I met Bill Evans there. I took Bill Evans out to breakfast at Dominic's.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, and I saw, well, Elvin Jones and talked to him at the Big Jillies. This was later on. And I was trying to think of, yeah, I mean, there was like, oh, I remember one time I drove to Chicago to hear Tony Williams with a couple people. One night I went up there to hear him because I wanted to hear him so much in person. So I did do that. I never did hear, well, I did hear Miles Davis in person, but that was out in LA, you know, years later when he wasn't really doing the bop thing anymore. He was doing a different thing. So it wasn't as thrilling, you know, as what I would have liked to have heard. But yeah, those were the people I can remember hearing. And then just, there used to be a lot of jam sessions here. I went to them all the time. There were a lot of musicians that lived here that were like some of the big bands. I think some of the Duke Ellington, some of the you know, big band musicians lived around here, and they'd be at the jam sessions. So you had a really good quality jam session going on. You had things happening where, you know, the love of music was just, with jazz, it's a kind of music that you share, you know. Everybody knows the same tunes, everybody shares, and you play off of one another. It's like a conversation. And they don't have that, like, going, even with rock. There was a lot of rock going on too. In fact, I played in a lot of rock bands around here. I played in Gene Shiverdecker's son, not Gary, but his older son had a rock band, and I played with him and their rock band for a long time, and we played at like Battles of the Bands. They had Battles of the Bands, mostly at the skating rinks. You know, I played in several of those. When I was 18, I joined the Johnny McCoy Orchestra, which was a 7-piece society band that read big band charts, but they were condensed down to a 7-piece band. And I was asked to join that band when I was 18, which I did. And we played a lot around here. We played a lot around in Columbus. We played shows for people, like, you know, people that would be coming through that needed a band to back them and do a show. We played for them. And then the Frank Kalinowski, Bernie Edwards, these were local people that were musicians around here that I played with. Bernie Edwards was a piano player. Frank Kalinowski was a guitar player I played with a lot. Chunky Loman Orchestra, or combo, it was usually 4 or 5 people. I played a lot with him. And, you know, the things just kept rolling. It was a wonderful beginning.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Beatles. Were there, I mean, they obviously had a huge impact on the music scene everywhere. Were there any other bands besides them that had a major influence on the Dayton music scene?
Yeah, I mean, you mean big names?
Yeah.
I personally, myself, like as far as the rock world went, the people that I really loved and listened to and probably influenced me, as a guitar player, you know, I played Beatles songs, you know, and I started in that direction too with my guitar. But like Janis Joplin, who we don't hear nearly enough of, you know, we always hear Jimi Hendrix, but we never hear quite enough or hardly all of her, I guess because she's a female. That really bothers me, but Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the Allman Brothers, Jim Morrison and the Doors. These are the people I can think of off the top of my head that I would like, you know, I'd go to my friend's house when I wasn't playing where my regular age friends would be, you know, that I was hanging out with. That's what we were listening to, you know, and I loved it. They were great. I mean, they were great musicians. So, yeah, those were the people. I think they influenced all of us, and the Southern rock, the acid rock, the emotional singing, like, you know, Trudy and the Hopple Street Exit, you know, was a very great example of rock and roll during that time.